You finally get home. The door closes, and something in your brain goes, ah, finally. No people asking questions, no traffic, no awkward small talk, no deciding where to go. Just your room, your favorite food, your phone, and absolutely no reason to put on real pants for the next 6 hours. And the funny thing is, some people don't see staying home as missing out. They see going out as interrupting something they were already enjoying. Maybe you've turned down plans because you genuinely wanted to stay home. Maybe you look at a crowded restaurant and think, that sounds exhausting. Maybe your perfect Friday night is not a party. It's doing absolutely nothing. And if that sounds like you, there's something interesting happening underneath it. Because loving your home isn't necessarily about being antisocial, and it isn't automatically introversion. In many cases, it's about something much deeper. How your brain experiences stimulation, control, safety, and reward. And once you understand that, you might stop wondering why you enjoy being alone so much. You might actually understand why home feels different from everywhere else.
Think about what happens when you're outside. Even when you're not consciously doing anything, your brain is processing information. Who's around you? What are they thinking? Where should you look? Should you say something? Is someone waiting for you to respond? Is the environment too loud? Do you need to make a decision? Do you want to leave yet? None of these things necessarily feel overwhelming individually, but your brain doesn't get to completely switch off. Being around other people requires attention, and attention is limited. That's one reason social situations can feel surprisingly tiring, even when they're enjoyable. You might have a great time with your friends and still come home thinking, I need to be alone for a while. That's not a contradiction. Enjoyment and exhaustion can exist at the same time. It's like going to the gym. You can love exercising. You can feel amazing afterward and still not want someone to say, great workout, let's do another 3 hours. Your brain works similarly with social stimulation. But here's where things get more interesting. For some people, home isn't simply quieter. Home gives them control. You control when you eat, when you sleep, what you watch, who you talk to, when you stop talking. You can pause a movie.
Pause a conversation. Pause the entire world. And psychologists have long recognized that perceived control matters for how people experience stress. When you feel that you have control over your environment, situations often feel easier to manage. When you don't, even small things can become irritating. Think about the difference between watching a movie alone and watching one with 5 people. Alone, you can pause it. You can rewind, you can get snacks, you can leave. Nobody cares. Now imagine watching the same movie while someone keeps asking, who's that? What happened? Why did he do that? Are we almost finished? Suddenly, the movie isn't the problem. The lack of control is. And this is one reason home can feel psychologically comfortable. It's predictable. You know what you're getting.
But there's another piece. Your brain learns. Every time you stay home and experience comfort, relaxation, entertainment, or relief, your brain makes a connection. Home, comfort. Home, reward. Home, safety. Home, no pressure. And the more often that happens, the stronger that association can become. This is basic learning. Behaviors that reliably produce rewarding outcomes are more likely to happen again. So imagine you have plans. You don't really feel like going. You cancel. Immediately, relief. That relief matters because now your brain has learned something. Avoiding the situation made me feel better. And next time you get invited somewhere, the temptation to stay home becomes slightly stronger. Not because you're lazy, not because something is wrong with you. Your brain is simply very good at remembering what reduced discomfort. And sometimes, comfort becomes a habit. This creates a strange psychological loop. You stay home because it's comfortable. Because it's comfortable, you stay home more. Because you stay home more, going out starts feeling less familiar. And because it feels less familiar, home becomes even more attractive. This doesn't mean staying home is bad. Far from it. Your home can be where you recover, where you think, where you create, where you spend time with people you actually care about. The problem isn't comfort. The interesting question is, what happens when comfort becomes the only place you feel comfortable? Because those are two very different things. There's also something people often misunderstand about introversion. Introversion isn't simply, I hate people. An introverted person can love their friends. They can enjoy parties. They can be incredibly social.
The difference often has more to do with how someone responds to social stimulation and where they tend to recover their energy. And personality exists on a spectrum. Some people genuinely enjoy a lot of social stimulation. Others prefer smaller groups. Others prefer solitude. And many people move between these depending on the situation. So if you love staying home, you don't automatically need a label. Maybe you're introverted. Maybe you simply prefer low stimulation environments. Maybe you enjoy your routines. Maybe you don't like unnecessary socializing. Maybe your home has become your favorite place to recharge. Or maybe you're avoiding something. And this is where the story gets more interesting.
Because sometimes I love staying home means exactly what it sounds like. But sometimes it means I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to feel awkward. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to have to perform. And those are different experiences. Imagine someone who genuinely enjoys solitude. They stay home because they prefer it. They feel peaceful. They don't feel like they're missing anything. Now imagine someone who stays home because going outside makes them anxious. They want friends. They want experiences. They want connection. But avoiding those situations gives them immediate relief. From the outside, both people look identical. They're both at home. But psychologically, they may be living completely different lives. That's why behavior alone doesn't tell the whole story. You have to ask, what feeling is this behavior giving me? If staying home gives you peace, that's one thing. If staying home gives you relief from something you're afraid of, that's another. And that distinction can change everything.
There's another reason people become attached to staying home. Familiarity. Your brain doesn't have to work very hard in familiar environments. You know where everything is. You know what usually happens. You know what your routine looks like. And humans tend to prefer things that feel familiar, not because familiar things are always better, but because they're easier to predict. This is part of why the outside world can sometimes feel disproportionately exhausting. It's full of uncertainty. You don't know exactly what will happen. You don't know who you'll meet. You don't know whether you'll enjoy yourself. You don't know whether you'll say something embarrassing. At home, you already know the plot. You've watched this episode before, probably several hundred times. And there's something deeply comforting about knowing what happens next. But here's the perspective shift. Maybe people who love staying home aren't necessarily less social. Maybe many of them are simply more selective about where they spend their attention. Think about it. If you had unlimited energy, unlimited time, and zero social pressure, you might enjoy almost everything. But you don't. You have limited attention, limited emotional energy, limited time. So your brain starts asking, is this worth it? And sometimes the answer is no. Not because you're broken. Because you'd rather spend 3 hours talking to one person you genuinely like than 3 hours surrounded by 20 people you barely know. That's not necessarily antisocial. It can be selectivity. And selectivity can actually become more valuable as you understand yourself better. But there is one trap worth watching. Comfort can quietly shrink your world. Not dramatically, not overnight, usually very slowly. You skip one invitation, then another. You stop trying new places. You stop meeting new people. You spend more time in routines. Eventually, your life becomes extremely comfortable, but also extremely predictable. And the brain adapts. What once felt like comfort can become limitation. That's why the goal isn't force yourself to go out all the time. That's ridiculous. The goal is to notice whether you're choosing solitude or hiding inside it. Those are completely different. If you're staying home because you genuinely love reading, gaming, creating, thinking, resting, cooking, or simply enjoying your own company, there may be nothing to fix. But if you're staying home because you're terrified of being judged, that's worth paying attention to. If you're avoiding people because you're exhausted by constant stimulation, rest may be exactly what you need. If you're avoiding people because you believe nobody will like you, that's a different problem. The same behavior can have completely different psychological meanings.
So here's a simple question you can ask yourself. Next time you cancel plans, don't immediately ask, am I becoming antisocial? Ask, what am I getting by staying home? Peace? Rest? Freedom? Control? Or relief? That one question can reveal a lot, because sometimes your home is your sanctuary, and sometimes it's your hiding place.
And knowing which one you're using it as is more important than how many times you leave the house. There's also something beautiful about being comfortable alone. A lot of people spend years trying to escape their own thoughts. They need constant noise, constant entertainment, constant notifications, constant company. But people who are comfortable being alone often have something valuable. They don't always need another person to make the moment meaningful. They can sit quietly, think, create, read, listen to music, make food, watch something ridiculous, or stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes and somehow call it processing. And solitude can create space for self-reflection. You get to hear your own thoughts without everyone else's opinions constantly entering the room. That's valuable. But again, there's a balance. Healthy solitude says, I enjoy my own company. Isolation says, I don't believe I can connect with anyone. One expands your inner world. The other can shrink your outer one.
So maybe the people who love staying home aren't all the same. Some are introverts, some are highly selective, some simply enjoy predictable environments, some love having control over their surroundings, some are recovering from an exhausting social world, some are deeply comfortable alone, and some may be using home to avoid fears they haven't confronted yet. The behavior looks the same. The psychology isn't, and that's probably the most important thing to remember. You don't have to become someone who is constantly outside. You don't have to force yourself into parties because someone told you that life begins outside your comfort zone. Sometimes life begins on your couch. Sometimes it begins with a quiet evening alone. Sometimes staying home is exactly what your brain needs. But every once in a while, ask yourself whether you're staying because you want to or because you're afraid to leave. Because there is a difference between protecting your peace and protecting your fear. And maybe the healthiest life isn't one where you're always surrounded by people, or one where you're always alone. Maybe it's having enough self-awareness to know when you need each one. Because home should be a place you can always return to, not a place you feel you can never leave.
And if you enjoy understanding the hidden psychology behind ordinary things you experience every day, stick around. There are a lot more strange little things your brain does that you've probably been experiencing your entire life without realizing why. Maybe that's what makes understanding yourself so interesting. You don't become a different person, you just finally understand the person who's been there all along.